Hello, Brabs. Obviously, this is Letters Home by Sylvia Plath, Correspondence 1950 to 1963. It's an odd cover, and it's obviously missing its jacket. I don't particularly know anything about her letters, but we shall read one or two or 23. Dear Progenitor, May 13th, 1953. Dear Progenitor, the month sounds strenuous but challenging and lots of fun. I've already sent in the names of 4 writers, one of whom I will meet, interview, and be photographed with. My tentative choices are J.D. Salinger, Catcher in the Rye, and Tremendous Stories, Shirley the Lottery Jackson, E.B. White of New Yorker fame, and Irvin Shaw. Hope one of these luminaries consents to be seen with me. May 15th, 1953. I hope maybe you can write a bit this summer. Articles about your teaching job. For one of the women's magazines, I'd love to edit for you. Of course, sharpening up writing again. Once it's rusty is very painful and almost prohibitive. As the why should I waste my time doing something that will never be published attitude is easy to have. But you deserve to pamper yourself increasingly now that the hottest 20 years of your life are over. And you deserve all the returns you can get from your wonderful selfless work and help to Warren and me who love and admire you more than anyone else. You have managed to create a warm, loving, intelligent family unit where pride and love and mutual achievement make us all very close. I never know anyone for long before I start holding forth with pride about Grammy and Grampy and you and Warren Smith, and all the opportunities now opening only make me want to affirm my rich heritage all the more. Love, Sylvie. The 2 days at home between her last examination at Smith and her departure for New York were crammed with frantic activity, including the completion of assignment for Mademoiselle. Dear Mother, New York, New York, June 4th, 1953. Dear Mother, so incredibly much has happened so quick and so fast these last 3 days. From my window, I look down into gardens, alleys, to the rambling 3rd Avenue L, down to the UN with a snatch of the East River in between buildings. At work at night at my desk, I look down into a network of lights, and the sound of car horns wafts up to me like the sweetest music. I love it. Whooshed up to the 6th floor of 575 Madison, spent morning with other ads, filling out endless forms and job data in mirrored dark green and pink conference room, which is our headquarters. I talked with Rita Smith, fiction editor, also sister of Carson McCullers, Polly Weaver, jobs and futures editor, who had my job on press board when she was at Smith, and Betsy Talbot Blackwell, fabulous editor-in-chief. Afternoon rewrote poetry squibs again, article poets on campus, thumbnail accounts of interviews with Alistair Reid, Anthony Hecht, Richard Wilbur, George Steiner, and William Burford. Assignments announced. One of my best friends from Washington State is editor-in-chief. I'm managing ed and moved my typewriters into Cyrilli Abel's office today. At first, I was disappointed at not being fiction editor, but now that I see how all-inclusive my work is, I love it. I work in her office, listen surreptitiously to all of her conversations on telephone, and in person read all copy and do a lot of managing. Deadlines, dirty work, etc., but it is fun. Her secretary is a girl I knew at Smith last year, so all is relatively untense now, almost homey, in fact. I have to write comments on all the stuff I read. Just got through criticizing Elizabeth Bowen's speech she gave the very day I talked to her. Intellectually stimulating. Also will have a chance to criticize poetry, etc., so my fiction interests are included here too. Affairs scheduled include fashion tours, e.g. John Fredericks, hats, UN and Herald Trib tours, movie preview, city center ballet, TV show, dance at St. Regis Roof, and dinner. Sounds exotic. What? Love, your managing editor, Cyrilli. All right, let's skip to another one. To Mother. This one. To Mother. From to subject, Cabbages and Kings, which I assume is the O. Henry book, but maybe there's another name for it. Date, Monday, December 13th, 1954. This morning, a happy thing happened. My second semester schedule, which has hitherto been a mess, is settling out miraculously. Had a conference with Alfred Fisher about my most recent poems, and he offered to give me a private course 1 hour a week of special studies in poetics. He is a very strict man and a brilliant professor, and this is a signal honor. Also, I'll be writing poetry. The nasty requirement for a unit this semester, for which I have no desire or need, will probably be changed by the honors committee to include this course in special studies so that my program will cohere beautifully. I must be very quiet about it all because Friday is terribly strict about taking any... Fisher, because Fisher is terribly strict. I don't know why I said Friday. About taking on anyone to be tutored, and the waiving of the unit requirement as yet to be done is highly irregular, but it will mean my being able to take Kazin's Modern American Lit course in poetry, plus my Shakespeare and German courses, which continue, and the review class, which is required. So I'm very excited and must write both prose and poetry over vacation with a big do not disturb sign on my door. In eager anticipation, your loving daughter, Sylvia. Let us advance. Dear Mother, here is a copy of the poem I said I'd send. It is called The Lady in the Earthenware Head. The lady in the earthenware head, fired in sanguine clay, the model head fit nowhere, thumbed out as a classroom exercise by a casual friend. It stood obtrusive on the long bookshelf, stolidly propping thick volumes of prose. Far too unlovely a conversation piece, her visitor claimed, for keeping. And how unlike, in distaste he pointed at it, brick dust complected, eyes under a dense lid, half blind, that derisive pout. Rude image indeed, to ape with such sly treason, her dear face best rid, hearthstone at once of the outrageous head. With goodwill she heard his reason. But she, whether from habit grown overfond of the dented caricature, or fearing some truth in old wives' tales of a bond, knitting to each original its coarse copy, woe if enemies in wrath take to sticking pins through wax, felt loath to junket. Scared, unhappy, she watched the grim head swell mammoth, demanding a home suited to its high station. From a spectral daze it menaced her in a dream, cousin perhaps to the vast stellar head housed in stark heavens, whose laws ordained now bland Now barbarous influences upon her purse, her bed. No place, it seemed, for the effigy to fare, free from annoy. If dumped, discarded, rough boys spying a pate, spear glowering, sullen, and pompous from an ash heap, might well seize this prize, and maltreat the hostage head in shocking wise, afflicting the owner's sleep. At the mere thought, her head ached. A murky tarn she considered then, thick silted, with weeds obscured to serve her exacting turn. But out of the watery aspic, laureled by fins, I can't say it. The I can't say it. Leered, lewdly beckoning, her courage wavered. The simulacrum leered, lewdly beckoning, her courage wavered. She blenched as one who drowns, and resolved more ceremoniously to lodge the mimic head in a crotched willow tree, green vaulted by foliage. Let bell-tongued birds descant in blackest feather on the rendering, grain by grain, of the uncouth shape, the simple sod again. Through drear and dulcet weather, yet shrined on her shelf, the grisly visage endured. Despite her wrung hands, her tears, her praying, vanished, steadfast and evil-starred, it ogled through rock fault, wind flaw, and listened, fisted wave, an antique hag head, too tough for knife to finish, refusing to diminish by one jot its basilisk look of love. And that's that. XXX Sylvie. Let's see. This is a long one. Very long poem. Dear Mother, Saturday afternoon, February 24th, 1957. Dear Mother, hello. I realized after I had put the call through that it must not yet be 6 a.m. in the hamlet of Wellesley. Is that how you say it? Wellesley? I'll say Wellesley. But I thought you wouldn't mind being wakened up by such good news, and I simply couldn't keep it another minute. They had changed your phone number, so there was much delay in waiting, but finally you were roused and discovered. We walked around in the trance hall yesterday. Ted and I felt grumpy Saturday morning after a week of 3 letters from editors rejecting Ted's poems for spurious reasons. They talk about having room for poetry as if they only had visas for a special secret aristocracy, and the visas were all taken. They are so sorry. Well, the idiots should make room for fine poetry. And that's Ted's. The big judges, W.H. Auden, Stephen Spender, and Marianne Moore, all of whom I met interestingly enough, are big enough to recognize new poetic genius and not be scared of it as small, jealous poets and frightened poetry editors are. The telegram came at about 10:30 yesterday morning. We gawped at it. At first, we both thought that Ted's poem at the Atlantic had got some piddling prize. Then light dawned, and we both jumped about yelling and roaring like mad seals. The telegram was from New York and said, "Our congratulations at Hawk in the Rain judged winning volume Poetry Center first publication. Award letter will follow." Well, we await the letter in a fury of excitement to know details. No money prize is offered, just publication by Harper's, I believe, but under the auspices of these fine judges, the 3 best living and practicing poets in the world today. Wait, this is 1957? You forgot Jeffers' Baby Girl. The best and E. Cummings in the world today. I'm sure Ted's books will be a bestseller. You know, it is to the day, not to mention that Bukowski was around then, but a lot of people don't like Bukowski, but compared to Stephen Spender and Marianne Moore and H. Auden, yeah, Bukowski was better. You know, it is to the day the anniversary of that fatal party where I met Ted. And I'd read his poems before and had a vision of how much I could do for him and with him. Genius will out. We are not letting it go to our heads, but working twice as hard. I only hope he gets his book of children's fables accepted somewhere. He has got a terrific idea for another children's book, and we could demand a really good illustrator if this one were a published success. The second one is about his demon fairy, Snatch Craffington. Snatch Craffington. Craftington. Snatch Craftington. Taking a little boy or boy and girl on 26 adventures through the lands of each letter of the alphabet, from the land of A to the land of Z. I am more happy than if it was my book published. I have worked so closely on these poems of Ted's and typed them so many countless times through revision after revision that I feel ecstatic about it all. I am so happy his book is accepted first. It will make it so much easier for me when mine is accepted, if not by the Yale series, then by some other place. I can rejoice then much more knowing Ted is ahead of me. There is no question of rivalry, but only mutual joy and a sense of doubling our prize winning and creative output. You know how breathlessly I always waited for mail and prize telegrams. Well, imagine how marvelous it is to have Ted grown equally sensitive to the mailman's miraculous potential footstep and wait as eagerly as I. From the time Sylvia was a very little girl, she catered to the male of any age so as to bolster his sense of superiority. I recall her when she was 4 years old, watching a boy of 11 demonstrating his prowess on a trapeze for her, clapping her hands, crying, "Junie, Junior, you are wonderful." In her diary, written when she was a seventh grader, she described coming in second in the junior high school spelling contest. The boy came in first. "I am so glad Don won," she wrote. "It is always nice to have a boy be first. And I am second best speller in the whole junior high." She did not pretend the male was superior. She sought out those who were, and her confidence in her husband's genius was unshakable. Well, that's nice, considering he was a philandering prick and a dandruff laced. I can't call him a poetester. Anyway, a whole pot. Well, he is a second fiddle to her, but I won't get into that. A whole pot of milk burned black on the stove yesterday while we called you and danced about. We had to air the house. It was burnt down to a black crisp, the milk, I mean, and throw the pot away. Then both of us wandered around town in the rain, shining with joy. We ate lunch at a lovely English bar, salad, bread, and cheese and ale. Bought an armful of books, had tea opposite King's, and a delicious supper. We didn't have enough money for snails and venison, but are going back to eat them if I win any poetry money soon. We don't care really what reviews the book gets as long as it's bought and read. It's magnificent, far superior to Richard Wilbur, any book is, who never treats the powerful central emotions and incidents of life. Ted writes with color, splendor, and vigorous music about love, birth, war, death, animals, hags, and vampires, martyrdom, and sophisticated intellectual problems, too. His book can't be timed. It has rugged, violent war poems like Bayonet Charge and Griefs for Dead Soldiers, delicate, exquisite nature poems about October dawn and the horses, powerful animal poems about macaws, jaguars, and the lovely Ark, one which appeared in the Atlantic and is the titled poem of the book. He combines intellect and grace of complex form with lyrical music, male vigor and vitality and moral commitment and love and awe of the world. Oh, he has everything, and I am so happy with him. This year is hard for both of us. I should not have 3 jobs, writing, cooking, and housekeeping, and studying for tough exams. I would like, after a year and maybe 2 of teaching, to satisfy my self-respect to give up work and combine writing and being a wife and mother. But children only after I have a poetry book and a novel published, so my children fit into my work routine and don't overthrow mine with theirs. We are such late matures, beginning our true lives at the average age of 25, that we don't want children for at least several years yet, until we're well off enough financially to afford a housekeeper. So I won't be torn between domestic chores and my writing fulfillment, which is my deepest health, being articulate in print. We plan to stay in America probably 2 years, then apply for writing fellowships, both of us. Saxton and Guggenheim, and live for a year or two writing solidly in Italy and a villa near Rome. And then, if there are children, perhaps you would come over in the summer to live next door and help babysit now and then. As Dr. Crook, who is Doris to me now, the dear woman, said so sweetly yesterday at my fine supervision on D.E. Lawrence, it seems to be nothing but delightful choices and prospects for us to write soon. XXX Civi. Dear Mother, March 7th, 1957. Dear Mother, the most blissful thing is your 2 letters about the Spaulding's Cape Cottage. You don't know the change that's come over Ted and me, just dreaming of it. For us, it's the most magnificent present in the world. A time and a place to write, and the Cape is my favorite place in the world. Just the vision of that little spick and span kitchen with the refrigerator and stove, and the sun streaming in sustains me through the grim plotting and studying masses for exams. And to have a place I know will be such a rest. It is really exhausting to have to discover a new town, shops, quiet nooks, etc. And I think the 7 weeks on the Cape will be the best start on my campaign to make Ted fall in love with America. He's getting really excited and glad about it now, and I vicariously am more than doubly glad to go back and open up its treasure chests to him. He loves to fish, so maybe you and I can accompany him and Warren deep sea fishing some weekend. We'd love a party on June 29 and should be marvelously rested from the boat trip. My exams finish about June 1st, so I'll have leisure to pack while Ted goes on teaching right up to the sailing date. By dint of much typing, I managed to keep 20 manuscripts out continuously from both of us. There was a dead lull for a week after the telegram. Miraculously, with the publication of a sumptuous new Cambridge-Oxford magazine, which contained 2 of my poems, right after an article by Stephen Spender on request from the editor, our fame has spread around Cambridge among the students. Editors of Granta, the Cambridge New Yorker, have humbly asked both Ted and me for stuff. I came home after my classes late yesterday afternoon and found the very sweet boy talking to Ted, editor for one of the spring issues. I made coffee and gave them a piece of orange chiffon pie, and we had a good talk. Ted is much more modest than I about his work, so I act as his agent. The next issue of Gemini, the new magazine, in May will carry 3 poems by Ted and a story and book reviews by me. I think Granta may well produce us both. We do love to appear together. The undergraduate magazines are read in London by editors. There are so few university writers, whereas in America, undergrad publications are legion and ignored by higher-ups. I've convinced Ted that his book will sell better if people get to read and hear and like his poems first. He is difficult, strong, and overpowering, and needs to be read much, so he should publish everywhere he can. I have another little editor coming tomorrow, really a nice fellow, very brilliant, who went to Moscow this year on a student visit, and who translates Russian short stories, etc. She'll try another Apfokuchin, whatever the hell is. I don't know what that is. I love giving hospitality to intelligent people, Civi. continue along in this line. Dear Mother, March 12th, 1957. It is with the maximum of self-control that I don't at this moment rush to call you up again over the phone and rouse you at what must be 4 a.m. Hold on to your hat for some wonderful news. I have just been offered a teaching job for next year at Smith. I got the nicest letter from Blessed R.G. Davis this morning. I know, dear. Blessed Miss Chase is responsible for this and for my knowing so early. The salary sounds very fine to me, $4,200. Well, you can imagine how much indefinite, vague concern this sets at rest. I am just walking on air. Ted is so happy for me and is really excited. He will help me in every way. We are writing Amherst for him, and if there is nothing there, we'll try surrounding boys' schools, but with my good salary, I'd rather have him working part-time at a radio station or on a newspaper than having to have a killing program such as he has had this year. As I see it, this means 9 hours of teaching a week, 3 courses of 3 hours each. I know they are the last stronghold of liberalism at Smith. Harvard et al. Are producing PhD businessmen. Did you see in the Alumni Quarterly where President Wright stood up against the project to lengthen PhD term of work and advised against the absurd requirement to have the PhD thesis add to the sum of knowledge, as it made people spend years on ridiculous, worthless subjects? He said these requirements might be all right for the plotter, the routine, stodgy type, but would discourage brilliant young potential writers with a creative gift. Imagine what pride I'll feel working under a president with such fine ideas. I'm writing Dear Miss Prouty at the same time so you can share the news with her, feeling I've already told her firsthand. I know just what you mean about winter doldrums. I've started taking thyroid again and feel much better. It got so I couldn't work after 2 p.m. I felt so sleepy and uncaringly exhausted, but I feel suddenly as if I see light behind the grim advancing hydra of exams. Beautiful light, writing furiously on the Cape, teaching and writing furiously at Smith, in the lovely Pioneer Valley among the people I admire most in the world. What an introduction for Ted. We still wait for the letter about his book, but I imagine it will come out next fall. And then what fine publicity it will have in the center of these poetry-conscious university communities. So light your way through this grueling rundown month with vision of a summer and an academic year within driving distance of us. Naturally, I'm humble and a little awed by the teaching job. I'll want advice from you and courage this summer. I want to make them work devilishly hard and love every minute of it. I can't think of anything I'd rather do than teach at Smith. I know it, of course, and not the higher up ins and outs of the department, but what they do. I remember the dull teacher I had for freshman English. Will do my best to fascinate the little girls and keep them gaping at dangling carrots. Carrots? Carrots. I am thinking of having a suit or two tailor-made here. I'll throw away my knee socks for good and be a grown woman. How wonderful not to be always receiving. If I'd been offered a writing fellowship, I'd have turned it down. I feel a deep need to develop my self-respect by teaching, by giving out, and Ted understands this so well. I bogged down on the second of 2 stories I'm working on for the Ladies' Home Journal market. This last one based on the character of a Smith classmate and called The Fabulous Roommate. Well, he took me on a long evening walk, listened to me talk the whole plot out, showed me what I'd vaguely felt I should change about the end. Last night he read all 30 pages of it, word for word, unerringly pointing out awkwardness here or an unnecessary paragraph there. He is proud of the story, thinks it's exciting and valid as a character study, not an art story, but the sort of thing that takes up where I left off in 17. Love to you and dear Warren, your happy civvy. Ted's a prick. April 8th, 1957. Dearest Mother, I'm at last coming out of a ghastly stretch of sterility put upon me by writing countless essays last term, taking all my writing energy. I just yesterday finished one of my best, about 56 lines, called All the Dead Deers. I so appreciated your apropos quotes from Auden and Cronin. They help so much. Just to know it is normal to have cycles of feeling barren as hell sustains one. I am now growing more and more accustomed to it. But both Ted and I realized the fatality is to stop writing. We would go on daily writing a few pages of drivel until the juice came back rather than stop, because the inertia built up is terrible to conquer. So for our health, we write at least 2 hours a day. I am plotting daily on my novel and have about 80 single-spaced pages ground out. Actually, 160 manuscript pages. My aim is 300 single-spaced pages by the time I come home. Then the blessed summer to ram it into shape. I must say I have the most peculiar feeling about my book. I am grinding out a lot of tripe, having never written a novel, and as Ted says, won't know what I'm saying till I've written the first draft. But it's a place to put everything in, a kind of repository for my thoughts and feelings, and freeing them with this wonderful fluency. I have a feeling in flashes that I can make it a bestseller, but only with at least a year's work. I'd love to dedicate it to Mrs. Prouty and hope I can get her to approve when it's done. Got up at day with Ted and went for a long walk to Grantchester. Or is that Grand? I don't know. It's English. Before settling down to writing, I never want to miss another sunrise. First, the luminous blue light with big stars hanging. Sorry, I'm looking at my fingers in the camera. Then pinkness spreading translucent and the birds beginning to burble and twit from every bramble bush. Owls flying home. We saw over 15 rabbits feeding. I felt a peace and joy being all alone in the most beautiful world with animals and birds. Little shrews twitted from the tall grass, and we saw 2 lovely brown-furred water rats. Remember the wind and the willows, feeding on the bank, then skipping into the water and swimming. You'd laugh, but I'm going to put this scene into my novel. We began mooing at a pasture of cows, and they all looked up, and, as if hypnotized, began to follow us in a crowd of about 20 across the pasture to a wooden stile, staring, fascinated. I stood on the stile and in a resonant voice recited all I knew of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales for about 20 minutes. I never had such an intelligent, fascinated audience. You should have seen their expressions as they came flocking up around me. I'm sure they loved it. Well, must be off to shop and laundry now. I'm ripping through French translations of Baudelaire. No, that's not how you say it, or maybe it is. And Stendhal, and feeling virtuous. What news of dear Worry? Love to you both, Civvy. Dearest Mother, November 28th, 1960. Dearest Mother, I'm sitting here in the late evening, curtains drawn, the little Pifco warming the room cheerily, in my bathrobe as one of Ted's rare nights out. On one of Ted's rare nights out. He has driven to Coventry with Dido Merwin and John Whiting, a playwright, to see Bill Merwin's play at the Repertory Theater there, the Golden West. Bill is in America collecting thousands on lectures and readings. Ted left about 3 and won't be home till 3 or 4 a.m. as it's a long drive. So I've had one of my rare times to myself. I realize how crowded we are here when I am alone for a bit, enjoying every minute of it, feeling inclined to do little secret things I like. I am now working very hard on something I never really attacked right. Women's magazine stories. Very rusty and awkward on my first. I got into the swing and I'm half through my second with a plot for a third. I also have a fine, lively agent who wrote me about a story of mine in the London magazine, whom I have not met and who is affiliated with one of the best New York City agencies. And so after I get my earliest acceptances to in the many women's weeklies here, they'll send any stuff good enough to the Saturday Evening Post, etc. For the first time, I feel I know where I'm going. You bastard. You. Thursday, July 6, 1961. Wherever. Something, France. Dear Mother, I am delighted by your 2 good letters so full of Frida. I loved hearing every word about her. Already she seems like a different child. She is growing so fast. And while I am having a wonderfully restful time, I miss her immensely. The Merwins farm is idyllic, with a superb view, plum trees, country milk, butter and eggs, a billion stars overhead, cowbells tinkling all night softly, and Dido is the world's best cook. They made the whole place over from a pile of bramble-covered stone, and it is full of antique furniture salvaged from peasants' barns, stripped of varnish and waxed to a satin finish. Ted is so rested it does my heart good. I am tan at last from sunbathing on the geranium-lined terrace, and relieved for a time to be completely free of mail, phone calls, and London. Today we are going to a local market fair. I am glad to hear you are taking in a play. Do take it easy. Yorkshire could be a nice rest for you. I am so renewed. I am dying to take care of Frida again. We'll be home in time for supper Friday the 14th, I imagine, and plan to leave for Yorkshire very early the following Tuesday for a good week. After we come back to London, Ted and I may go to Devon for a day or so to look at houses. I would so like to have a place lined up before we go to Italy this fall. See you in a week. Keep us posted. Love, Civvy. November 20th. Oh, dear Mother, it is a marvelous, crisp, clear December morning. I am sitting in the front room with Ted and Frida, overlooking our acre of grasses, which are white with frost. After a week of black, wet, sunless weather, everything seems suddenly bright and cozy. I am trying to get off the bulk of my American Christmas cards by ordinary mail today, so I will be a bit saving. The reason I haven't written for so long is probably quite silly, but I got so awfully depressed 2 weeks ago by reading 2 issues of The Nation, Juggernaut, the warfare state, all about the terrifying marriage of big business and the military in America and the forces of the John Birch Society, etc. And then another article about the repulsive shelter craze for fallout, and all very factual, documented, and true, that I simply didn't sleep for nights. With all the warlike talk in the papers, such as Kennedy saying Khrushchev would have no place to hide, and the armed forces manuals indoctrinating soldiers about the inevitable war with our implacable foe, I began to wonder if there was any point in trying to bring up children in such a mad, self-destructive world. The sad thing is that the power for destruction is real and universal, and the profession of generals who, on retirement, become board heads of the missile plants to which they have been feeding orders. I am also horrified at the U.S. selling missiles without warheads to Germany, awarding former German officers medals. As the reporter for the liberal Frankfurt paper says, coming back to America from his native Germany, it is as if he hadn't been away. Well, I got so discouraged about all this that I didn't feel like writing anybody anything. Ted has been very comforting, so has Frida. One of the most distressing features about all this is the public announcements of Americans arming against each other. The citizens of Nevada announcing they will turn out bombed and ill people from Los Angeles into the desert. All this official. And ministers and priests preaching that it is all right to shoot neighbors who try to come into one's bomb shelters. Thank goodness there is none of this idiotic shelter business in England. I just wish England had the sense to be neutral, for it is quite obvious that she would be obliterated in any nuclear war. And for this reason, I am very much behind the nuclear disarmers here. Anyway, I think it appalling that the shelter system in America should be allowed to fall into the hands of the advertisers. The more money you spend, the likelier you are to survive, etc. With 59% of taxes go for military spending already. Well, I am over the worst of my furor about all this. Each day seems doubly precious to me because I am so happy here with my lovely home and dear Ted and Frida. I just wish all the destructive people could be sent to the moon. Ted, you're going to the moon. Today came a big Christmas parcel from you with the 2 Ladies' Home Journal magazines. Well, which I fell upon with joy. That magazine is so much Americana. I love it. Look forward to a good read by the wood fire tonight and to trying the luscious recipes. Recipes in English women's magazines are for things like lard and stale bread pie, garnished with cold pig's feet, or leftover pot roast and aspic. I feel so thwarted not to be giving out anything but cards, as I love buying presents for people, but we have felt we need to really pinch this year to weather the piles of bills for plumbers, electricians, extra heaters, coal, land tax, house tax, solicitors, surveyors, movers, and all mountainous things. As if to sanction our move, we have been very lucky in earning money this fall. My Saxton in 4 installments is ample to live on. Each September, we plan to pay you and Ted's parents back each $280 of your loan, which has been such a help in saving us tons of mortgage interest. We have 2 more Pifco's electric heaters, making 4 now. The cold is bitter. Even my midwife said it was too Spartan for a new baby and to warm things up. The halls are hopeless, of course, but the Pifco's do a wonderful job in closed-off rooms. The cold seems to keep us healthy. Not one of us has been taken with a cold yet, knock on wood. We look fat as bears with all of our sweaters, but I find this nippy air very bracing, and so does Frida. Her fat cheeks bloom, even though her breath comes out in little puffs, much healthier than the overheating we had in America. We had a lovely time laughing over the takeoff issue of Mademoiselle, and now I am embedded with the journals, especially delighted with the apple recipe issue. I hope Warren is having a peaceful and pleasant year and isn't too overworked. I feel dreadfully lazy myself. I really write terribly little. I remember before Frida came, I was like this, quite cow-like and interested suddenly in soppy women's magazines and cooking and sewing. Then a month or so afterwards, I did some of my best poems. I rely on your letters. You are wonderful to keep them so frequent in spite of your load of work and being sick. All of us send love, Civvy. That's all, bruvs.